let's go ahead and bring Ryan in. It is Tuesday, which makes it a T-Lab Tuesday. And our third mic here is our good friend and brother, the host, founder, the last American vagabond, Ryan Cristian, everybody.
Good morning.
And the guy who officially called out Elon for being full of shit, I remember it was on this show. I'm going to give Ryan credit because I really wasn't buying the Elon game, but it was the Alex Jones thing, right? And you even said when you came on the show next day, okay, well, he's acting on emotions. What rules, what laws, what did he break? Why isn't he coming back? Really, this is going to just be more of the same. And a lot of people were like, well, no, you can't let Alex Jones back on because Alex Jones, and Sandy Hook and the parents and the family and shit. It's like, guys, you're not getting it. What's the law that Alex Jones broke? Let's be consistent. Free speech absolute. It's good.
Right. I love the I'm going to take this. We're going to get into the BlackRock probably thing I think you mentioned. I got this from Catherine Austin Fitz at the CHD fundraiser. It says make cash great again, which I love. So I'll take it off since it's shadowing my face. But just that it's interesting that little thing you just mentioned there, and we can flesh out the Elon thing because I do think that's interesting. And you guys know there's plenty of people out there, yourselves included, that we're seeing through it as well. But it's interesting that we see these little games that are played, and I think people that are outside the two-party paradigm can identify it, where like what you just described, where before this weird dynamic, it would have been like, oh, of course, well, free speech, you got to let him back, but then suddenly they create this weird dynamic where you're creating a situation where the very people that moments ago were fighting for free speech now are undermining it because they're defending Elon. Or like a good example is like with the trans conversation where suddenly right-leaning people were going, they can't have guns. And you're like, do you not see how even if you are having the right, even if you're taking a correct stance in someone's eyes, can't you see how you're being driven to undermine the very thing that you thought you were defending? It's happening in every conversation right now. It's fascinating. But back to Elon, I'm just glad I hope people can start seeing this now. I mean, look, is it possible that tomorrow or a week from now, a year from now, it could swing back and be like, here's all the source material, here's all the Fauci file? Maybe, but it still doesn't change the fact that it's not what was promised. And anybody objective can see that it's led to, as Steve has been really harping on, a training of people to engage with subjective opinions based on things you think you're seeing and you haven't proven. Even if they are true. And I think we all agree that most of that's pretty true. So I'm glad to see people are seeing through it. But since you're talking about the BBC thing, I'm interested in your opinion on that, Steve. I think that's it. So you think it's all completely staged? Because I thought the BBC thing, stage or not, was still fun to watch at the very least.
I mean, sure, it's fun to watch because you're watching a BBC reporter get what all of these clowns should get every time they're confronted by anyone. But I mean, they call Twitter, and Elon Musk gets okay. So here's what happened. We had Miriam Hinine on the show last week. Back through. We had her back through, and she goes, I was in a Twitter space that was listening to this thing because Elon put it on a Twitter space, right? The interview. Right. Mm-hmm. And what happened was all of the other Twitter spaces that were watching, commenting, having their own sidebar conversations started to glitch out. Of course. And everybody got routed into that one where there wound up being almost 4 million people in one Twitter space that were at the sole moderation of whoever was running that between Elon and the BBC reporter. It became like on the BBC's part, honestly, maybe they thought that they were going to be able to get in there and land a few punches. Maybe maybe they did. Maybe
that's the thing that sticks out. Like, I just don't see how BBC would want that to happen that way,
But as a stage managed event from the perspective of CEO of Twitter, start to finish, it couldn't have gone off better. And everybody on the platform got routed into that one spot. The things that he was pointing out, I mean, let's be honest, like it is nice to have your thoughts echoed back to you by somebody with that sort of status. It is.
That's the play,
so
right?
hey, everybody give yourselves a big pat on the back for being as smart as the richest guy in the world. Like,
but that you're right though. So that would be the play, right? So to get us to go, hey, I think that, and then all of a sudden we're in alignment with Elon, or I mean, even without that. So it's the same thing we were just talking about. It's if this is the way it went down, it makes sense that you now suddenly so you set us up with a softball. Look at this bumbling idiot on BBC who doesn't understand. We're all like, yes. So you're unconsciously already on Elon's side, right? And so what's interesting is I think my big thing, we addressed this on our last Pirate Stream show episode, the Pirate Stream Dialectical Dissidence, that the kind of the buried lead was that he basically said that Twitter files are behind us. He basically said, he asked him, I'm moving forward. It's like, oh, wait a minute, man. There's no source material. There's no Fauci files. Like the things that most people were actually interested in, other than the cheerleaders and people like even Matt Taibbi. I mean, I don't know if you guys already talked about that, but this whole split with Substack, the way it all went. I mean,
notes and all that.
Yeah, and look, I'm from my perspective now. This is all continue to flesh out, and I don't think I ever really saw Matt as look. I pointed out that I'm pretty sure he knew that what he was putting forward was not the same quality of what he's been putting forward before with source material. I don't, maybe he thought it was going to go a different way. I really don't know. Maybe it was a career move, but now that it's finished, my perspective is basically that I think he feels manipulated. I think that he feels, that's why he's broke off and he's going to Substack. At least that I haven't followed up since then. Maybe it's shifted a little bit again, but
I think it was about the finances. Excuse me. Wasn't it about the finances when it came to Substack?
Well, obviously,
trying to explain his situation. He's making a lot more money on Substack. He has no choice but to, because that's where his base is. So
well, that makes sense, But what to me is that Elon Musk obviously allowed this so far. So that's a really disingenuous rug pull, just to be like, oh, I've let you build all this. I think what Elon thought is that he would just take the bait, which was bring it all to Twitter, because that's what he said. Oh, well, write it on Twitter then. And Matt was like, well, no, this is obviously a game. So however, whether Matt was involved with what I see as the dishonest nature of Twitter files, or he thought it was going to amount to something else, it ended up the way we thought it did or would, at least right now. And that's dishonestly. I mean, it did not culminate in what we were promised.
But this is something we all said from the get-go, that this was a bunch of hogwash. A lot of people were coming down on me. I remember a lot of people getting mad. It's like, how can you say that? At least the material he is putting out is really, beneficial. It's something the public should see. I said, yeah, but it's very selective. But it's selective,
right?
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? You can move it. You can move the narrative any way. This is something that Steve was talking about, the source material from the get-go.
Right.
Sorry. Go ahead, Ryan.
No, I'm sorry. I always interject. It's just my mind. But the point is that they are not mutually exclusive. That's the point you're making. Is we're allowed to say, look, those things have truth to them, and more to your point. It's almost guaranteed that there's a lot more truth around those plucked out points without source. Like we got screenshots of partial paragraphs of documents. Like why in the world that somehow translates to the full picture? Like it's just like that. It's the same thing we're highlighting this whole time, that people are being driven to go, yes, that thought right there is what I thought. I'm trying to get people to say, I've been saying it since 2020. And they go, hooray, he's on my side. And so I think we've progressed into this new level of psyops, a new level of they know we see this, guys. That's the point. The government is very aware that we are seeing through their tired agendas. And so they're just trying to repackage this stuff on a kind of a microcosm analogy to that. Somebody was just making fun of, I think it might have been Patrick Henningsen. I forget who it was, but basically showing this new CNN mix up. It's like, here's the new CNN Central. And it's like, all they're doing is just juggling up all their tired people. They've put 3 new of them together that have never been on a show together. And they're like, the new CNN. It's just, they're desperate, man. People don't like them anymore. So they're trying to juggle it all up,
To that point, there's, how many times have we sat here on a Tuesday and said how easy it is to be the perceived hero or good guy when the bad guys are so openly, blatantly terrible?
Yep.
Right.
Well, you put the BBC in front of anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together who's already a little bit combative to that, part of the media anyway. They're going to come out looking like they, you just took care of every bad dragon in the kingdom. They are. And to think that that's not how 5th generation warfare is being waged, each and every day on multiple levels, especially when you've got DARPA sitting there in Elon Musk. You know,
That's
this
an
is
important point.
I don't know, man. I don't
People
know.
don't think about that overlap, right? I mean, so if he is a contractor that literally right now works and overlaps with military, but DARPA as well. Well, I mean, that is military, but specifically DARPA. The point being is that why then, you know, like he is obviously in line with that agenda. And then if we can't stand back and see that DARPA, that Operation Warp Speed in the entire direction with the inject, I mean, it's all DARPA in the same direction. So it's just amazing that like Republicans specifically in this point can't see that, at least the ones that are still lost in this, that they are supporting this guy as a hero when everything they think they're fighting is completely lined up with this. I mean, I had a similar thought about, and again, even coming from this recent event, which I support children's self-defense. I think what they're doing is important, but the point I made on my show the other day, not to deviate again, my mind always connects these points.
No, that's what the show's for, baby.
Right. But that you know, if I was running for office, what I would want is people not to just blindly trust what I'm saying, right? If somebody is honest, you know, you should welcome people to question your policy. Like come out and go, well, maybe he's wrong. Maybe he's lying. Maybe he's being deceived himself and doesn't realize it. I would say yes, because I believe my policy and I know that I'm honest. So bring the questions all day long. The reason I'm saying that is because often what you get is this kind of rabid defense by the people that support them, as well as their kind of pushback on these ideas that it's like somehow pearl clutching, like, how dare you suggest that I would lie? That's the response of a liar, right? That's how usually what you get. My point is that I think it's important that we question the RFK and what he's doing and his run, because just like with Gabbard, which I don't trust, I don't believe that her intentions are good based on numerous things, but I always will hold out hope. We should always hope they're the right person. But when she started, I said, damn, she looks like an excellent candidate. I said that many times. I said, she's probably one of the most perfect looking candidates I've seen in a long time. And I said, but until I see something that suggests otherwise, I you know me, I don't vote. I don't support that because I believe it's broken, but I'll still, you know, outwardly support it. And then obviously things changed in my mind. So same thing. I think that this could be a positive direction to talk about medical freedom. My point that I'm getting at is that he's running as a Democrat. So how does that work for Republicans that, like, for instance, at the Tennessee fundraiser, there's a lot of people that are like hardcore Republican, Trump supporting, you know, people literally there supporting this are screaming Democrats are pedophiles. So how does that work? Right? Like, how does that dynamic change? I'm just interested in how you see that.
Okay, so how does Robert F. Kennedy not know that all of that Act Blue money is going to go to the DNC? And if he's not going to use that Act Blue link, he's not going to be allowed
He
to
knows.
he's not going to be allowed to be a Democrat, period. Like, that's part when you go to file the paperwork to be that candidate.
Yeah.
You sign saying, I agree to use your fundraising vehicles, mechanisms, tools, suites, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. That's contingent on running in the primary. You have to no longer be a Democrat in order to get out of that whole Act Blue thing.
Right. And I think you have to sign the promissory note that you'll endorse the candidate that wins the whole thing. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Part of it.
Go ahead.
But we found out because of the Becks and Nico and Tim Canova several years ago, the entire primary is just a giant money laundering opera. They admitted it in court.
Yeah.
The entire thing is.
They said technically, Steve.
Well, what they said is a donation to a candidate is no guarantee that the money will go to the candidate.
Or more specifically to the vote, even, right? That just because you guys actually pick this person doesn't mean we have to actually do what you vote for. The entire
they don't have to follow their whole charter. Yeah,
it's crazy.
Technically, if they wanted to, they can go into the back room full of cigar smoke. Sorry,
that lawyer said,
exactly.
That lawyer goes,
Bruce
"There's
Spiva.
no such." He goes, "There's no such thing as a Democrat."
Yeah.
He said that in court. There's no such thing as a Democrat.
Maybe he did. Yeah, I don't think he meant it the way that we all actually understand that the reality that they're all the same thing. But that's the truth, right? It's just the government, guys, and different ways to manipulate you to see them as something different, to divide us, to achieve policy and agendas. Yeah,
but that's the time I was like hearing
his point was when you donate to a Democrat, There's no such under the structure of the DNC. There's no such thing as an individual Democrat. There's the organization, the Democratic National Committee, and that's who you're donating to.
Mhm.
You're not donating to an individual.
Yeah.
There's
It's the
no
corporation.
such thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
And remember, all this stuff was to cover up for rigging an election. So
Debbie
me, I
Washington
was like,
Schultz and all that. Remember her?
oh yeah, totally. And just the way they counted votes and everything that happened in all these other states. I mean, I was like, that's when I put up my music and I was hearing the bugle going, dun, 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 let's go, charge. And I turn around and they're like, we're not going anywhere. I'm like, what are you talking about? This is the moment. They just admitted it's rigged, it's fake. Let's go.
Right. And yeah, nobody cares. That terrible, terrible, terrible person, Debbie Washington Schultz, is still in a position of power. Like, even despite all the criminal activity, and literally, like, it's crazy, because that's what people that break the law and violate their oaths in just the right ways get promoted, right? I mean, we see this in every field.
Nobody even remembers the Awan brothers.
I was going to say, I knew you were bringing the Awan brothers into this.
Nobody's talking. It's like they just got to skate with something like $60 billion or some shit. It was ridiculous. 600 million or something, dude. It was, but gone.
We also we knew who owned the Capitol Police then too as well. I mean, there was one dude holding off. Remember that she wanted this one laptop and she was sitting there arguing with the Capitol Police dude. Like,
that's right.
You're going to give me this laptop. I don't know.
Well, you know what it shows you? It shows you that whatever that shows, there's people kind of different opinions on what that what that little part is, the bigger part behind it, what that represents. It's corruption, obviously. But what it really, in my opinion, shows you is that that's how all of this works. They all know. And when you get these little glimpses of things like that and nothing happens, it's because they're behind the scenes going, well, we're all doing that. This is the way the real system works. And these people in the right positions of power, when when there's not too much awareness, when they need somebody, scapegoat, it all just gets put to bed. I mean, we can, like I always mention this one. This is the most obvious for me, that you have I forget their names, the two guys from Boston who presented just a mountain of evidence about pay to play from the Clinton Foundation. Remember that? And they had congressional hearings and they just laid this stuff out. It was like undeniable testimony, evidence, documents, financial records. Literally nothing happened. Like, it just went right to bed. Nobody, it's like we thought this is one of these parts that kind of overlaps with the first conversation. It's as if the discussion of it, the awareness of it was enough. Oh, they're embarrassed. We got them. You know what I mean? It's like, it's really strange. And that happens every day, man.
Going back to that first part of that conversation, though, I think that we were prepped. We were ready when Elon came on. Well, first of all, Slow News Day, I mean, and Jason Burmis, you guys have been talking about Elon for God knows how long. You know what I'm saying? Like, you guys been pointing out who this guy is for quite some time. Even Fee calls him DARPA boy now, like, in the RT studio. She say, "Oh, DARPA boy," and they're like, "What's this DARPA?" And she's like, "Okay, sit down." But I mean. We had, I think, first of all, it was like, still kind of guessing what Donald Trump's role. Is he playing that role? Is he trying to swing people this way? Bannon was one of those guys. Steve Bannon, when it came to the election stuff, he would take on guys like Garland Favorito, Jim Brakey, who's a Democrat. Like, he would bring all these people. Then he was his COVID stuff. He was getting all these other people like James Roguski, who was making, sounding the alarms about the WHO, and all these other people you didn't see anywhere. And you were so sold. You're like, all right, I'm committed because this guy is speaking truth. And then he goes, he's taking you this way for a war with China. So I'm always looking for the drag and dupe. And that's what I really thought that Elon was doing. It was like, here's the dupe and drag you. And I'm like, no. I first of all, the thing for me was the source material. That's all I wanted to see. I'm like, I'll open up the fucking engine. Let us look at it now. Show us the source material. Show us how your algorithm puts somebody down or brings somebody up. And Steve kept talking about, the actual source material. And then when you said that stuff when it came to, Alex Jones, and it just made you think, and it's like, yeah, why? What is his reasonings? Because even in my mind, it was like he was justified for not letting him back on. Then I was like, wait a second. No, he's not. Right. He's got to let him back on. So I think we're always kind of prepared and waiting for what's the next, media to act like your friend or bring you that way, or what personality to act that way and bring you that way. That's why I think when, Steve was talking about yesterday on Union, you were talking about we were talking about it with Hirosh, the superstar kind of mentality, the worshiping and whatnot. They know that that in our society that, you know, a lot of people want leaders. They look up to certain people. So if they can get you with somebody, they're going to get you with somebody. And I think we've been prepped and ready, and we're always prepared for that now. And that's why it's harder to do bus.
Yeah, it's the savior complex, right? I mean, that's the last thing we
I was there.
be looking for one person, you know.
Yeah.
It's got to be a collect. It's got to be the people. We can't look to government at this point, in my opinion, ever, but especially now. But to make even a finer point to that, you know, look, if all I'm looking for is honesty, right? I mean, like if Elon Musk came out today and said, "Look, I promised you all of the information in Fauci files, but it didn't happen." That even hasn't happened. There's still this equivocation about how it did, but it did, and you don't understand. It hasn't, right? And we need to just be honest about that. But if that happened, and so look, here's why, though, I would still, as always, question that and wonder if he was lying and wonder if there's more to the story. But at the very least, be addressing it honestly and saying, here's why we didn't give you what we promised, because it turned out that it's more complicated than I thought. We haven't even gotten that kind of an honest answer, right? It's just this sidestepping and attacking anybody that points it out.
But here's why. It's because they sold it as Elon Musk called Matt Taibbi at 1:30 in the morning. Matt, I need you to meet me at such and such and such and such. I have some thumb drives. And, you know, just get like personally handed over the Twitter files. And that's not what happened. They went through a whole ass legal team. There was all kinds of shit that had to go down behind scenes before any of these handpicked people from right around the outside allowable parameters of narrative management got a hold of them.
Except Barry Weiss.
And so, yeah, and Barry Weiss.
Oh yeah, I would say she's a go ahead.
And yeah, I was getting there. I was, but so if Elon were to come out and say, okay, look, well, yeah, I said we were going to deliver this, and it turns out we couldn't, people would go, okay, why?
Right.
And they've just spent the last 6 months pretending like this was a one-to-one transaction between, or, you know, pass off between Elon and Taibbi or Elon and Schellenberger or whatever. And at any point online, if you bring up, like, they had to have an army of legal that looked at all of this shit before they allowed anybody to fucking print it. You know what I mean? On both sides of it, really. You know,
I agree.
People push back on that.
Right.
And they're like, or it's completely dismissed. So that's what I'm saying. If Elon were to even be even a little bit honest about it, it would lead to innocent questions. And I mean, natural questions, not even like gotcha or okay, you know, nothing, just routine. Okay, but why? And then there will be an immediate, you know, hello, my baby. It's just tap dancing all over the place. And then it's going to fall apart.
Right. I mean, that's a good point to make, is that, you know, people, the point is, if you start from a point of dishonesty, honest questions, general questions, that's a problem. And that's kind of the whole crux of the point. Like, to the point about the legal counsel process, I don't understand still why people don't realize how, I mean, maybe there's a story to be told around this that makes this make sense, but explain for me how Elon can take over. We know that the legal process was taking place as they discussed, where they have to, it's going through the legal counsel, right? That was made clear by all of them. And then, like, I forget the time frame, days or week later, remember the story that Barry Weiss's jaw dropped when they found out the FBI was at the lead, or the former, however it worked, the guy at the lead counsel position was either with or former FBI. I'm like, okay, so how did that not get known from Elon, from anybody, as you guys are literally dealing with these people? Like, so we just didn't know that? Great due diligence. Or obviously, I think it's clear that was sort of, that doesn't make sense to me. Now, I think maybe there's more to the story, but why doesn't people?
There is more to the story, but it was printed in mint press news well before they ever got a hold of the Twitter files. So, I mean, and this is what I was saying this on the Critical Hour yesterday, either Elon Musk and his entire legal team are the most naive people on the planet and the most trusting people on the planet, or everybody knew this stuff
Right.
And now they have to pretend like it's earth-shattering, groundbreaking news. In Barry Weiss's case, most likely for, a little bit of relevancy or something like that, where you have to put breaking in front of everything because that's the only way you're going to pull people to the content kind of stuff.
Right.
But it's, which, and I'm not even saying that doesn't work. It's just,
there's so many points like that where if you just take a moment to engage with it, it doesn't make sense. How is it possible that somebody didn't know that? And then even going forward, it seems like there's this ubiquitous argument that it's like, oh, well, there's probably just more FBI. It's like, okay, so what point does that start implicating the people currently there? Like, I feel like we're going to go 5 years from now and it's going to be like, oh, it was the FBI, not Elon. It's like, that is Elon. Like, this is just, it's just, they play like we don't know what's going on because it's so complicated and we don't even fully get why it does. Maybe that's true. It's just such a surface level argument, and I'm tired of people taking things at face value. It's all team sport politics. I wanted to make one more point before we got too far past it, though, like just since we kind of pulled away from it. What I was getting at in general with the point about RFK and that whole thing is just that I think it's important that we, consider all the sides of this, and don't just like I am as critical and questioning of literally everybody in politics as I possibly can be. But one of the things I think is being stated is that they're essentially the early opinions, I think, of people that are supporting this is that his effort is to really just draw attention to the medical tyranny. And he has doesn't believe he's got a real chance of actually winning. So it's more about that. And maybe that's the case. I don't know. But I think it would have made far more sense to run as an independent. And I think he possibly could have even won if that had happened. And I think, it's just like with the rest of them. Like, why? Like, even, I mean, I'm actually expecting somebody to do this, like a Donald Trump or somebody to run independent. And then I'm just going to question that probably like everything else. But I definitely think it makes sense because, I mean, there's a lot. Like I just saw, I think today, actually, from Fox News. And we've been saying this for how long? 44% of people who took this poll represent as independent. And then it was like 20 something left and 20 something right. The country is predominantly independent and we don't get that, So I don't know where your opinions lie. I'm very skeptical of this just because of the way it went forward. The moment I heard Democrat, I'm thinking, damn it, man, you're supporting like the most obviously corrupt part. I mean, it's all the government, but I would say the same thing with running with the RFK.
Yeah, but Ryan, he wants to change it from the inside.
Maybe he thinks that. I don't know.
Yeah, we all thought that. We were all sniffing glue, and we know it's not possible. Like what Steve had pointed out, they don't even have to represent anybody. There's no such thing as a Democrat, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But and listen, I would think it's more legit, and I think it's less fugazi if he did run as an independent. I said the same thing about Donald Trump when he got blackballed by the Republican Party. Why didn't he start the Patriot Party or whatever and stuff? He would have had 5 million registered people right away to get a legit third party. But that's the whole thing. The crux of about the whole situation is no matter what, there can never be a third party. It's got to be the two-party illusion, right? The two-party apparatus has to be put in play. That's I think with a lot of their election rigging, they make sure that the Libertarian Party doesn't get near that 5%, that Jill Stein doesn't get near 5% for that, public funding or whatever.
I don't trust Jill anyway, but but I mean, I think you look at the Parliament, like in UK, right? I mean, I argue it's the same game, but there's obviously more than two parties, so it definitely can still work. But I think you're right that where they've shot themselves in the feet countless times, right? So I think they're at a point now where they can't allow that because they know that people would sprint into some kind of third option right now because that's where everybody is. They're like, we don't agree with anybody right now. So I think that they kind of like shot themselves in the foot in that regard to where they can't do that now. But I think they've eventually wanted to do that because like I made the argument about how it's interesting how in this election, it seems to have already broken down to DeSantis and Trump on one side and RFK and Biden on the other, which is like, so it's like, we'll give you a two-party paradigm, but we'll give you two choices on every side. It's like,
no, there's Vivek Ramaswamy now on the Republican side.
Well, there's always a bunch of candidates. You know what I'm
saying? And Nikki Haley, you're gonna count her out, dude? I mean, one of the greatest UN secretaries.
Yuck.
Representative things of all time.
She just has a disingenuous face. Like a lot of them are always like, I think they're all disingenuous, But the way that like she just doesn't have the kind of like I'm not lying to you shield that they put over themselves. Like she just looks like she's reading off of something, and like in her eyes, she's like, I can't wait to lie to you again. It's maybe my personal opinion, but
no, it's the Kamala Harris syndrome.
Yeah,
she's got it. Where
I thought that was the Neera Tanden syndrome that Kamala Harris got first.
Are we all just picking on ladies of Indian descent? Is that what it is? Is it?
Ryan said he didn't trust Gabbard, so that we're getting them all now. So.
I'm sure somebody would say that for sure.
Yeah.
I just trust dishonest. I don't trust
I'm in a
Gabbard
people. Household here. Shh.
Right.
Get me in trouble, man.
Now we're anti-women and anti-Indian.
Damn.
Apparently, that's how it works.
Anti-Hindu.
Welcome to the show, buddy. It's,
I want that quote. You guys keep on saying about Elon Musk. He knows. There's a movie called The Pope of Greenwich Village. I don't know if you ever saw it, but there's a scene where Mickey Rourke and Eric Roberts and another third character, they're driving away from a crime scene in which they just robbed the place. And Mickey Rourke keeps going, he knows. He fucking knows. I tell you, he knows. I wish I had that quote right now for Elon Musk. He knows. I fucking know he knows.
Eric Roberts, man. That's an old, what was his era? 90s, right? Like 90s and to do like, he was pretty famous for a minute.
Well, yeah, he had the Pope of Greenwich Village and he had a Runaway Train and he went away, but then he came back with Batman. So, I mean, just wishing the best for that dude.
That's right.
Yeah. He had a couple good movies, but the Pope of Greenwich Village was like a special movie for Italian Americans. They love that movie. That's, you know, Burt Young is in that movie. So, you know, it's just a lot. And then somebody won I can't remember her name. She won one of the Oscars for like a minor part and she just fucking nailed it. Yeah, it was a great movie. But anyways, I think Elon Musk knows. I don't agree with he's the most dumbest, oblivious owner on the face of the earth. We know he knows. I mean,
I think it's obvious. I mean, he's immersed with the contracts. I mean, he knows the direction. He knows what's all happening. I mean, you could argue that he doesn't like this is the point I made right in the beginning. You could argue that he is unaware, which I like to your point, Pasta. I think that's pretty naive and ridiculous. Or you could argue that he thinks, and this makes a little sense, that he's going to play it. I'm going to play them, right? I'm going to make it work for me. Like that would make sense from a Trump or an Elon perspective. They're full of hubris. They're these, trailblazing, off the beaten path. Like that's they're perceived that way, And so he would just, you could argue he's just going to use the World Economic Forum for his own benefit and then drop him. And, I don't believe it. I mean, I think that there's far more going on today, and we can all see that. And these kind of people are tapped into it, and I think they all get their benefits from it. It's very obvious. It's about control. And if you have every single one of your main contracts immersed with this direction, it's kind of obvious, I think. And I think people should start asking, if there's more going on that is, driving forcing him essentially. And not that I know anything about that, but just arguably with these people in positions like this, I don't think when there's this much writing on something like this worldwide agenda that you can just hope everybody does their part. There's more coercion involved. I would just ask what that might be, in any of the positions, like whether it's the JFK kind of talk we talk about with presidents, like what's the equivalent of that with somebody in business today? Interesting to think about. Just a random thought.
Well, I mean, to that point, we've got this.
Oh, yeah.
In this whole fun thread.
Right.
Shout out to Champagne Joshy.
Love that hat.
Yeah. Oh, I do too. It's actually a nice hat. I don't like the new, like people like I'm an old like baseball, like I don't like the flat bills, or don't like the fishnet,
Steve, what do you call that too when you do the trucker thing when he's doing?
Oh, I don't know.
I'm team trucker hat. I am, just because they look good on me, but it's also traditional style baseball hat. I don't like the flip. There's the host at the Dirty at 12:30 rags on all of the douchebags. Still got the sticker on it.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, come on, dude. Just no.
The key. What is it? The Key and Peele skit is the best.
You got to prove that it's brand new, because I've got what the implication that you just are rich, I guess, or that you can buy things. It's a superficial thing.
Dude was wearing like the display thing on his head. That's how.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, and he's like, oh shit.
That is funny, skit. But yeah, but this is super. Josh is just really doing a great job, man. I actually just reached out and said, hey man, you should, if you write an article, I think he said he was thinking what he might do, write an article for T-Lab, like on this breakdown.
Cool.
Josh Josh Walkos.
Josh Walkos, yeah, Champagne Joshy on Twitter. He just it's been doing great threads like this, but this is such an important kind of breakdown. Like a lot of people, have, myself included, have kind of like been chipping away at the peripheral of this conversation. I've had numerous great interviews with Catherine Austin Fitz on the going direct reset, which is like the first part of the financial side of like the Great Reset and all these different moving parts. It's just fascinating. The first thing that kind of stands out to me on this is we've talked about I did a show about it called the COVID coup, the BlackRock takeover of American interest. And right, remember this? It talks about the idea of, the foreknowledge, where their bailout plan was designed, as he addresses in this thread, before COVID ever started, but yet they justified it using COVID-19. And so if you want to go back to the one discussing the 2007, 2008 global financial, it's like a few down from the beginning. And I think it's interesting, if I have it up, if you need, it's interesting that, here, let me just pull it up then. Right here. It's interesting to me that this is something that I think I've talked about, but I don't think I've really put on the forefront of the conversation. There you go. That it says in the 2007, 2008 financial crisis, right? So the one all Americans know, and we're told a lie about how everyone went down, that catapulted BlackRock into financial dominance. So it's really interesting to think about the idea of whether the first one, not whether, I think we know there's more manipulation and engineering behind that too, but whether that was the first step of exactly what we're dealing with today, right? It says Wall Street turned to BlackRock for help, which before was, it broke away from Blackstone. And there's obvious Blackstone, BlackRock, Black Cube, all of this Israeli financial overlap and all this different stuff. You can prove these things connect. It says with firms like AIG, Lehman Brothers, Fannie Mac, and Freddie Mac, all hiring them to sort through their complex credit obligations. So the 2008 collapse was basically the first part for BlackRock to solidify its control. And then we have the second part, which is the COVID bailout, right? I mean, that's just an interesting thing for people to think about. That's just the first one that really stood out to me, is that this is long time coming, right? I think a lot of people need to realize that COVID was not the first part of this. This goes back a long time, even talking about 9/11 and the security state into the biosecurity state. Like we need to realize how long this has been being planned, in some way.
It is a good way to summarize it too, as well. When I started talking to people about this, I said, there's a group that has to kind of swallow up all the little small people down below. In other words, own all the properties which people rent, own the houses, the majority. And then those big companies come in and they grab those companies. So therefore, it's just a swallowing up of every single type of, as many businesses as they can get, as many home ownership as they have. They want to put you under one thumb. They want to have as much control as possible. Would that be a good way of explaining what BlackRock was kind of doing when they were buying up a lot of all these rental properties? Or
well, again, just to be clear, I'm a lot of time when even this thread, when you get into some of the more immersive financial parts of it, my eyes start glazing over. I mean, I'm not the financial guy, but I do my best to speak to people like Catherine and try to understand the deeper parts of this, and I think that for me, that what you just described is kind of like the surface level part of it, which is important to understand, though, that there is, like, on the surface, just the ability to create crises and capitalize on it. And I think we saw that with the basic, possibly the largest transfer of wealth in history. I mean, it's pretty crazy. But on top of that, scooping up farmland and all these different parts we saw. But I think it's bigger than that, really. That we're talking about.
Is that with the CARES Act, by the way, is what we're saying the biggest?
I mean, numerous examples. Yes, that's one part of it. But there's 1,000 different ways this was abused. Yeah. And again, to the point being, is this was designed even before we got here. So it's interesting that they could even know that this would work a certain way. There's so much foreknowledge. But I think it's bigger in my mind about how, like Catherine talks about the going direct reset, and how what this ultimately boils down to is central bankers controlling the ins and outs of day-to-day transactions and the ESG, all that overlap, right? I mean, we all see this developing. What Josh seems to be kind of overlapping here is this 2019, or a couple parts going even further back, but 2019 pre-COVID and into where we are, and the financial, basically one of these tweets he has up, showing how, well, I mean, it's complicated. I have the tweets up if you want to look at it, but the point about how, this shift happened. And this gets into stuff that I would argue that I probably don't even fully grasp. But the idea is, it says the gap between, let me start from here. Historically, the Fed couldn't print money in a traditional sense. Instead, it created reserve money, allowing banks to lend out more bank money in the real economy. But in 2020, the correlation between the Fed balance sheet and the commercial bank deposits changed dramatically. This video will give you, he puts a video for you to understand more. He says the gap between Fed created reserve money and bank created money acts as a type of circuit breaker. And this is why the flood of reserve money that the Fed created in the wake of the global financial crisis of 2008 did not result in a spike in commercial bank deposits. So as always, we're deceived about what this is really accomplishing. And then you can show at a moment here at 2019 forward how the intersection, which is, that doesn't seem to make sense. Here's actually a better clip of it right here, image, where you can see the red line is deposits by all commercial banks. The top one is liabilities and capital liabilities. Deposits, this is the thing you just described. The Fed and the commercial side of it versus the Fed and the banks versus, I'm trying to get the right words. Again, see, my point is I'm not the right person to describe this to you. I think I have a good understanding of what he's getting at here, but ultimately the point is that they shifted due to this argument about why this was necessary to do the going direct reset, and essentially gave the central banks just unparalleled control over where this goes. And ever since then, you can see that it's basically been in lockstep with what they have been doing. I don't think we even have control over, if ever, the financial direction of this country as individuals. I honestly don't think we ever did. But as you can read forward, it goes forward to say that dealings with the next proposed, the BlackRock and that group proposed the going direct reset due to this. So you could argue that going back all the way to 2008 and their actions, that this has all been organized, right? That this whole direction was to take control over our day-to-day actions. And then you got the digital ID, the social credit, the CBDCs, right? So this is kind of like in 2008, you could argue they didn't really visualize exactly what this would be. They understood that they were trying to create this, or maybe they did, but now we're at a point technologically where they're able to actually initiate that control structure using this kind of overlapping financial control. It's very concerning to me. But what I recommend people check out the interview I just had with Catherine Austin Fitts interview. SVB was executed, big bank consolidation in the financial coup, arguing that this was engineered, like from the top down, like the banks were collapsed. And her argument was that ultimately what was meant to happen was for us as individuals to be incentivized. Interestingly enough, going back to what we talked about in the beginning of this, using our own, what we believe in, creating a situation where we feel our own choice is to go to a bigger bank because it's safer, right? Get away from the SVBs because they're collapsing. Don't bank run, just go to these bigger, more controlled structures. And we're consolidating control, just like anywhere else. Very concerning to me. Yeah. But I hope Josh writes an article to better explain this. Go ahead.
Quickly. Our next guest is rolled up, and that'll be awesome. Roger Morik is the host of Geopolitics and Empire, TNT Radio. Fantastic show, and I think we've all been on it. I think so. And yeah, it's just I was on last night. Really good conversation. He's up early, and so let's pick on him a little bit.
Good morning.
Subway.
What's it going on? I'm all TNT'd out. I got my shirt, I got my mug. So
check off your advertising moments. Got it. Boom. Your obligations. Boom. Done.
Yeah, we don't have to stop every 15 minutes for 2 minutes on this one. It's going to be weird for you.
He goes, hi, I'm Roche. I work for TNT. I don't know if I told you guys that.
Yeah. I'm
So
waiting for the break.
how do you say your name, by the way? Please.
Hervoye.
I told you.
Three syllables. Kind of like Hervoye. Literally means Croat. I'm proud to be a Croatian. So.
Nice. It's good to see you again, man.
Way to run away from your Mexican heritage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What's your middle name? You got a Mexican middle name, so we can call you that.
No.
Damn.
I'm working on that.
It's like Milos or something like that.
Have you ever been to Mexico?
He lives in Mexico.
Yeah, I'm living in Mexico. Yeah.
What part?
Guadalajara.
Really? No shit.
If you're ever passing through, stop by. I'm a Mexican national. 5 years ago, I became naturalized. So
nice.
Proud Mexican too.
Are you familiar with Derek Bros?
Oh yeah, I was hanging out with him at the Great Reset a couple months back. Yeah, it was fun.
He's working on a project in Mexico too. Like you guys should connect. I think he's got a community going on there
in Morelia. He's got an end of the world community.
Right.
Agora.
Right.
And a great article that he just dropped on T-Lab about the GMOs and AMLO saying no to the white corn.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Well, they mostly use white corn. They're saying no to the GMO corns that are coming in from America. And
right.
They're a little bit
and
pissed
the
off.
U.S. government, which is that's the crazy part of the story, is that the U.S. government is actively on the surface going like, you have to do this.
Yeah.
And then suddenly we see like all these discussions of invasion and oh my God, the cartels, and we need to pass legislation to invade them. It's like, gee, come on.
They don't like AMLO, man, because he's always been like a little bit more like he's a different type of politician. I think they don't like him mostly because he's nationalized their lithium, and that's like, what are you doing? That's corporation lithium, you bastards.
He's a bad guy because he doesn't give it hands willing over to the real bad guys, right? But I mean, I think we've seen this coming. I said the same thing about Bolivia before it happened. It's not hard to see this stuff coming. They're just like, it's just on the surface where they're, somebody who goes afoul of, whether it's a gold reserve currency or something like that, which is a classic concept, or these days lithium. It's just so obvious.
He's been on a roll though, not just lithium. Just like a week or two ago, he bought out the electricity production. So now CFE, the public electricity utility, now owns a monopoly like 56%. So the government owns 56% of electricity production, which is pretty cool because I always joke my water bill annually in Mexico is $50 a year for the water utility. Wow. And then electricity is like maybe between $5 and $10 a month. And so he's taking hold of electricity, of the lithium, the petroleum. You guys mentioned the corn, and I've even talked to Mexicans here that are working class Mexicans that are traditionally conservative, and they're like, yeah, he's the least worst Mexican president we've had since I can remember.
So, I like that.
He got the uniform on for the World Baseball Classics, was on TV every day, so he kind of like normalized himself, but he did put himself up for getting fired. He had a referendum. He says, I'm going to put up a referendum halfway through my term, 3 years. I'm going to vote. You think I'm doing a good job? I'll stay. If you think I'm doing a bad job, we'll have snap elections and we can elect somebody else. And as soon as he won that, he came out of that, it seemed like guns a-blazing. Right now, we're going to get some shit done. So that's been very, very interesting. AMLO addresses this. He addresses he goes on TV every day. He addresses the nation and he talks every single day. He could seem, and my Spanish, I'm just still picking up words. I'm not firing back. I'm doing my best. I'm studying. I got my cue cards around here. But, he seems very slow, methodical, and boring. But at least he's addressing the crowd. And it seems like he's speaking from his own mental state, not Joe Biden getting pumped in.
Let me ask you guys something. This is an interesting dynamic right now because, and this is kind of a crux of a lot of geopolitical, nationalism versus globalism. And, so what's interesting is so from an objective perspective, not like, somebody who might, well, let's just put it this way. So AMLO is taking control of these things. So let's just say the government of Mexico. Now that can be concerning, and it should be, unless, in this case, it seems that you believe he's got good intentions, and maybe he does. It seems that way, right? But it's interesting that you can see a justification for doing that because of foreign policy by outside parties, right? Like the same reason you have like Russia and China who won't allow US aid in the country. Regardless of what you think of those countries, everybody can understand why that makes sense, right? These are Trojan horse, it's meant to do something other than the stated purpose. So it's obvious that it's in AMLO's best interest to control these things because there's outside forces like we see with the GMOs trying to control that. But at what point does that become concerning if it gets too centralized? Or even right now, right? Because in another sense, you see that governments centralizing control over things like that can almost always throughout history lead to a problem. So I just want your thoughts on that. It's an interesting kind of,
And AMLO's not going to be there forever too, as well.
Exactly.
That's another important thing. Go ahead.
It's already becoming concerning because, again, a few weeks ago, it just reported that the Mexican military, they got, this was Proceso, one of the main like Mexican, geopolitical outlets, reporting how the Mexican military's got a bunker now where they're illegally now spying on us Mexicans using, the Israeli Pegasus spyware software. And the military now is being given extra powers with no oversight. So it's like the military can go around. I think most recently was that they can detain people like unconstitutionally. So it's already like kind of freak out territory. And when AMLO leaves, if you get one of these crazy like Calderons or, these like right parties, which are they basically work for their corporations and their puppets. You know,
Exactly.
where does Calderon go when he's going to teach at Harvard? You know, he's a total CIA asset. And I've interviewed Jefferson Morley, fantastic journalist who wrote the book Our Man in Mexico, how numerous Mexican presidents were literally CIA agents with the code names Li Tempo, you know, and so it's already starting to freak me out.
I do have to say though that, you know, and there's two things. Number one, that I think AMLO doesn't have complete control of his military and whatnot. There's always going to be parts of it that, you know, have been there for quite some time. They have a continued relationship with the military, the United States government over here. We saw that. I think there's a lot of people. I mean, at one point, I think he replaced. I remember in Tijuana, the guards that were there, the old guards that were there, like the federalities were kind of pulled out, and he implemented this other type of force that was like supposed to be more friendlier and open to the people. And I think it was something that was going a little back and forth between him and the little jab at the military. But as reasons why a lot of these times people get elected and they want, you know, a little bit more governmental control over the corporations. And I can remember this when I did go to Nicaragua and I was speaking to somebody. I'm like, well, why are you supporting the Sandinistas? Why are you, going to vote for them this weekend? They were like, we told them, you come in here, you give us infrastructure, you build a road, we'll vote for you. You know, and they got this trust and this dependency on the government where they see the government working for them. Now, that is the problem when you pass it on to the next guy. It's always going to be scary. But I think that's why you do see a lot more of sometimes in Latin America, people standing behind these governments, especially this leftist governments, where their left is more economics and they want to give more to the people and less control to the, you know, individuals and the corporations. That's why you see this sometimes.
You know, that's interesting. I often ask this question, like, okay, so, you know, there's this weird inverse in world politics versus US where you've got the left that's being perceived as this wild, lunatic, crazy situation, which I think is obviously, you know, that is happening, but it's not every single person as always. But then on, you know, and then the right being perceived and framed as the one kind of like trying to bring the sanity back. But even right now, even Kim Iverson just tweeted about this, how it seems this already is kind of shifting where we've got this very serious conservative right now, all of a sudden being this, you know, and we're going right back to the other side. It's a teeter-totter we always talk about. But in world politics, it's interesting because you can make a fair argument, and this shouldn't be perceived as the left-right paradigm in this country. It's very different that you can see these left governments like Evo Morales in Bolivia and other places like in Libya with Gaddafi, these groups that were, or rather, I actually don't remember where he actually pegged in the anyway, the point is more specifically, you could point at places like Venezuela and so on. The bottom line being that they are fighting against this empirical force that's clearly trying to abuse them with their foreign policy. And, you know, whether good and bad, whatever, that is the part of it. And then you got the right governments that seem to side with the corporations and more so with the foreign policy. So is the dynamic in the United States just simply designed or being driven that way to make us perceive foreign politics a different way? Broad question, but I just think it's an interesting thing to think about.
My man, you want to go on that first?
I was just gonna say I'm biased because I'm a conservative and a Nick Cave fan. I like what Nick Cave said in an unheard interview recently. He said in 2023 to be a rebel, you go to church and you be a conservative. That was hilarious.
Which is okay. Let's unpack that for a second.
I was just saying that.
You
lightly.
woke somebody up over there. Go ahead, man.
And I love Nick Cave. Dude. I've seen Nick in the Bad Seeds a number of times. I think that little closeout scene at the what is it? The Coward Robert Ford, the assassination of Jesse James film. Right at the very end of it, there's a guy with a guitar and he's singing the song about Jesse James and Robert Ford. That's Nick Cave. Yeah. So anyway, like it's just but it's such an obvious counter narrative. Like it's just such, you know, if you want to fight the power, you're going to go to the traditional centers of organized power and vote Republican. Like,
back and forth.
Okay. I mean, come on.
It is the teeter-totter, right?
It is.
But here's the thing, too. The last time that Anya Parampel was on my show, Steve, were you done? I'm so sorry, brother. I didn't want to.
It's just life's little irony that the counterculture is now, let's go make ourselves a Rockwell painting.
Yeah. And we are talking about the teeter-totter. I call it the clown car going in one ear at the other. The only reason I was a Democrat was during at one point was the Iraq War, where I was like, these guys are fucking crazy, the Wolfowitzes and shit. The
And that's how it works.
preemptive attack.
Right.
You know, you had to be a Democrat. Then all of a sudden, some of your Democratic people started saying shit where you were like, we're going along with that. And then you're like, oh, wait a second, I'm out. But let me just say this much, too. The last time Anya Parampel was on my show, and one of the last questions we asked her was, and we wanted to, from what we've seen, we witnessed this, too, as well. Is there a difference between a right-winger in the United States and a right-winger in Latin America? And it was like, oh, hell yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, exactly, because here's the thing, but people don't understand. The left in Latin America is socially conservative. They're left in their economics, right? They when they talk about the proletariat, they talk about old school Marx. It's all economical. They're very religious. They pray on Sunday. They, don't believe in gay marriage. They don't like abortion. They don't even want to legalize marijuana. You know what I'm saying? They are socially conservative. It's only here in America where you get your conservatism versus your right versus left being cultural stuff, the cultural issues, and it has nothing that they want nothing to fucking do with it down below, down in Latin America. They're like, oh, hell no. Like, that's your own shit. What happens in our family is our business. The state's not taking over what we're doing inside of the house here. So that's why when we had Sarah Higdon on the show the other day, and we talk about when people just throw the Marxist thing out there, the cultural Marxism. It's like that didn't even come from Marx. It's all different. It's so different down in Latin America than it is over here, because a lot of those right wingers, they are sponsored, like anti-government, coming from murder death squads, corporations, hardcores, what I'm saying, getting weapons from the United States and using them on their people. Right. So that's why it's so different. But you know what? I suspect you're going to see a little swing over there too as well. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think the crux of the problem comes from it's an American hubristic kind of it's hubris. Like, we apply our lenses on everything around the world and force everybody else to see through the way we perceive things. That's kind of the crux of the point, is that they're different. It's just not the same thing. We just force it through our lens, right? And I think you're right, though. I think that it still has an influence on world politics just because that's the power structure. But I think the main point is that it's just not the same thing. And you've got people over here. Like, I think my point was that I wonder whether or not we're being played using our dynamic to force us to see people who may actually be trying to use political structures to achieve freedom and independence from an overbearing foreign policy, And so then it makes the people who are doing that look like the bad guy, because you're aligning them with these lunatics at the two-party paradigm level of the left, and meanwhile, there's plenty of left people that perceive themselves that way in this country that see through the two-party paradigm, or they may call themselves progressives. Then you got the patriots on the other side. They're starting to back away from the two-party paradigm, but they're still tapping into it,
The whole China thing, it's like people don't even understand China. They're looking through it through our lens. It's like, you gotta, I'm not saying that they're the Boy Scouts over there and that we should be praising them and going with their model or anything like that, but you're just looking at it through an American lens. You don't even understand what the fuck's going on over there. So,
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think when you were on my TNT show last year, Pasta. I mean, that was I think what you just explained was very good. It was the first time I heard anyone kind of put it out there like that, and it's pretty accurate. And unfortunately, I think in Mexico they did a poll recently of guns. How many Mexicans would like to have gun laws made more lax? And well, if you believe the survey, like 70% said no, we want guns restricted. And I'm like, guys, come on, we've got narcos running all over the place. Actually, one of my ex-colleagues from Detective Monterrey, where I used to teach, he recently disappeared for like 2 or 3 days. Posters on the bridges, and thankfully he reappeared. Some people said it was a secuestro express, like express kidnapping. And so I mean, this is the kind of stuff that's going on. And I just, my comment on the left-right thing is, as Pasta was saying, I think part of it is every country has had a different historical dynamic, in terms of development, economy, politics, culture. And so things are kind of messed up. But I, as you guys were saying, the left-right paradigm, like the circus, I never really bought into it. But the 2020, the COVID-19 84 fake pandemic, that's when it was like a nuclear bomb that I'm done completely with politics. In every country, and I got 3 citizenships, Croatia, USA, Mexico, and it's like in any of those countries where I was living in Kazakhstan, it's like left, right, it doesn't matter. It's globalists versus anyone not globalist, and whatever you want to put there, sovereignty. And they've penetrated all the cabinets, as everyone says, what Klaus Schwab says. I was talking to Here in Jalisco, the state of Jalisco, Alfaro, our governor, total globalist. I can show you with like the white papers of their own government. We get Rockefeller financing here. I'm living in a freaking smart city. Nuevo León, Samuel Garcia. This guy's bringing the Tesla factory there. He was hanging out with Schwab. He wants to censor free speech. He wants to take away everyone's cars in Nuevo León. I was just talking to someone in Yucatan who said their governor in Yucatan, fully globalist captured. So it's just like now we're in world government. So it's basically globalism versus anyone. And there's very few people remaining to fight the globalists, sadly.
Right. Exactly. Well, what's interesting is that we didn't even get to the second half of what Josh's thread was getting into, which was that ESG overlap. Right, where they're essentially creating. I mean, if you just cut to the chase, is that all that stuff with the stuff that I was probably misrepresenting ultimately on there is that they're going forward into the situation where they're using the ESG, which is interesting because we see this happening with Bud Light and all these other companies that are undermining their own business model to push something that clearly the people that buy their product don't want to see. And it's being forced on them, like even to the point to where it seems like it's not like people are arguing that they're being given a benefit to do so. But I think we just saw how they just went right back. And here's our pro-American ad with horses and forget what we just talked about. It's clear that they are being hit. They lost 50% of draft sales. Think about how crazy that is. So the ESG thing it's to their detriment and still they're doing it. So there's a huge multinational pressure coming from around the world from this globalist kind of agenda. And it's driving large businesses to undermine their own business. Like think about what kind of pressure that must be. That's crazy.
Although, did you see Budweiser's like new display at Walmart?
No, what is it?
Oh my God. Okay, let me bring it up here real quick. And then if you want, we can pull up the last little bit of Josh's thread too. But yeah, so Bud Light, not to be overly embarrassed. They really did. They ran into a Walmart and they're like, everybody ignore all the gay shit. We totally smash real pussy and blow people up because there you go. That's real. That's real.
A sad attempt to this is how stupid they think you are, right-leaning people, that they can just go, guns and military in America, buy our beer again. Okay, we love you.
Yeah,
again.
but it works.
I mean, to some degree it does. But my point is that most people are like,
Budweiser's back again. Ryan, what are you talking about?
Like, what's funny though? I bet you there are those people online right now doing that. And if you see them, understand that they're not your friend and they're dishonest and they're doing it because they have a motivation and it's advantageous to them to be on that side. But I mean, have you seen the commercial, Steve? That's what I was talking about, the Clydesdales and running in front of these big monuments. And it's just like, it's just pathetic, like at least come out and address the point. Anyway, I think it's hilarious that they think we're this easily swayed. And I think it's they're losing. I don't think it's working.
And we know there's plenty other cheap beers that taste like piss on the market. You don't need to go with Bud Light anymore.
Buy some Mexican beers, and I was just gonna comment.
You're gonna support the cartels? Get out of here!
That's where that goes, right? Exactly.
Come on now.
Stop eating guacamole and avocados. There's an article recently, like Forbes published, that said, "Don't eat avocados. You're supporting." I mean, well, how many American products support Ukraine war and whatever? So
what about California avocados? It's like that's a huge.
Well, you gotta get the Haas ones.
Right? No, dude.
God.
Dude, I was
avocados are easy as shit to grow.
Yeah. I know. There's the thing with the water. You can do it yourself with a glass and start rooting and go. Anyways, I don't know. We were talking about it briefly yesterday, and I brought it on both shows yesterday because I had a little China debate. The New York Times posted this article, and I didn't even know about this. And I was like, okay, we're entering the Salamanca parallel to the Walter White Breaking Bad story. I don't know if you know the Salamanca cousins, the twins. They were the badasses on the Chapo's 4 children got arrested for fentanyl stuff now, trafficking. So they're presenting that now in the courts. They're really building up this whole cartel story coming from China into the cartels, into the United States. They're going to get that bill signed.
There's a new hook to it too, where they just charged one of the guys from Charlottesville with trafficking fentanyl.
Well,
you got to get the domestic terrorist in there now.
It's from 2021 for people to understand it. He got
Yeah,
caught
yeah, yeah.
trafficking 33 pounds of fentanyl.
33 pounds of fentanyl.
That's just a little bit.
Is let's not forget the obvious to just quickly lay this out for people is that the Charlottesville group that is responsible for the rise above or the march that became the impetus for the Trump MAGA right terrorist perspective. That was the Rise Above movement. The Rise Above movement is the verifiable international arm of the Azov movement, which was created by was built and grown by the CIA. It's Project Aerodynamic. It's on the record. So it's interesting to all of a sudden find out that another person who was part of that is weirdly suddenly caught trafficking fentanyl, which is going to be used to push into Mexico. So I just posit the possibility that this is a CIA international operation using these people as operatives. Like, it's not a question to know that that's happening in Ukraine, but to see it pop up on the border when all of a sudden they're now going Mexico bad and invasion, it's just, I find that
such a good story, Ryan. Like, I mean, the opium wars, the way the Brits and the Americans had to sell their drugs in China and had to punish them, and the emperor saw his people addicted on it, so he outlawed it. And what now? So now they're getting us back, and they're using the cartels. I don't know how, like, they were like, the Chinese oligarchs were like, they called the CIA and they're like, hey, can we talk to your cartel people too as well? Is that what they did?
Is they called CAA.
Oh,
the casting agency. And they said, look, man, we need to do an Iran-Contra reboot.
Yeah.
We're gonna switch up the script a little bit. Think we're gonna somehow blame the Chinese.
Yes.
So why don't you get a couple of writers on it? Get me J.J. Abrams and let's put some fresh faces in on this one, okay?
Well, Steve, how do you know that the cartels are still being run by the CIA? Because they fucking told us. It's not even that long ago. Iran-Contra. And then the heroin thing where the CIA funneled into the pizzerias, to the Italian mob, a bunch of heroin. Like, they told us.
This is an article just from like yesterday, this week. It says AMLO has accused the U.S. government of, quote, abusive interference and espionage after the DEA revealed that it had infiltrated the Sinaloa cartel. But I would just add, like, I'm kind of on the fence. I don't like to make firm, if I don't really know what's going on, I'm not going to make a decision. I'm definitely not a China hawk, as you guys say. But it is concerning. There's people publishing, reporters now on the border, and you do see a bunch of young Chinese men coming in through Mexico to the U.S. I've got a friend who's a Peruvian American who used to live here in Mexico. He's a street preacher, and so he preaches on the Texas and Mexico border. And he calls me up a couple months back. He's like, "Dude, there's 1,000 Russians on the border, here in Mexico, trying to get in to Texas, and they're going through the processing centers." So again, I'm not. Yeah. So he called me back a couple months back. He's like, "There's 1,000 Russians." He's talking to them using Google Translate. You got Chinese coming in, and so again, I'm not a China hawk, but I think you got to have a balance. Like, I do think there could be a plan. I've talked to people on all spectrums. I've had people like Jeff Nyquist on and Trevor Ludon, who are like more China hawks. But I think there could be at some point the potential, if there's a war, Russia and China actually hitting the American homeland. And I think it's something to think about. But the whole Mexico thing, I think they just want to classify narco, as terrorism. They want to classify the cartels as terrorism just to, so they can send troops in. Mexico's already part of NORTHCOM, according to Washington. And so I think it's part of the whole North American Union deal, because we're already economically with NAFTA, USMCA 2.0. Culturally, we got the next World Cup in 3 years going to be held in Canada, USA, and Mexico. I think near my home, they're going to have one of the World Cup games here in Guadalajara. And so I think a lot of it has to do with the North American Union. So
I agree. It's interesting that they're going to hold it with 3 simultaneous countries. That's kind of an indication that it's we're global now. It's not about one. But what's interesting, though, is that you see Russians down there. I think the bigger picture, like, well, first of all, we should in no way dismiss the possibility that this is in fact foreign countries trying to flood. I mean, that's certainly possible, right? And that would make sense to a foreign policy agenda, especially to Potts's point, since historically you can, whether, predates the United States, the reality that Western powers had very clearly used opium to control, but let's not forget the U.S. government, Afghanistan, opium, and how that plays too. But it's certainly possible. But what I find interesting is that if you have Russians and Chinese immigrants, and the argument that they're all flooding in through the south border, that it seems like this is an agenda being pieced together now, where you can clearly argue that China is doing this because it comes from China, despite the fact that I think they've on the record said many times that 95% of fentanyl comes to the mail from China, but whatever. But the point being,
chemicals that they're going to be able to grab anywhere and be able to do it in the United States. They can already probably do it in the United States. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, it's okay. No, but just the other part of it being that if you have now Russian people coming through, how does that piece together? It does, in my opinion, when you suddenly argue, oh, well, here's a Nazi that just came through, and then arguably that this is being done because Russia is responsible for Nazism in Ukraine, and it all becomes this kind of Russia-China agenda together.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense with the way they're framing the foreign policy. Just a thought, not saying I can prove the main point there, but I don't know. I'm very concerned about the high level kind of like CIA or just intelligence actions we're seeing played out right now and the way it's being abused. I mean, we know, like to your point about the cartels, like we shouldn't dismiss the possibility that in and of itself is being facilitated, or as you said, the DEA is infiltrated. I mean, everywhere we look, all these events have somebody who is, he was an informant. He was I mean, how about that leaker from the Air Force? You know how he got caught? Somebody in the group spoke to the FBI. It's like, that was probably an FBI agent in that very group. Like that. And now, is that the impetus, or was he just doing his job? I think there's more control, in my opinion.
I think also, though, when it comes to the fentanyl situation, we're not looking at the main causality of the problem, right? Like when we talk about the border, any politician in my mind that's talking about the southern border is doing a disservice, as a distraction. Why are there so much migration coming up in the first place? Exactly. And I always refer to our 82 bases down there that are there for on behalf of the corporations to steal those natural resources. Dole, Chiquita is a great example. Guatemala, how they had nationalized their banana, it was taken away from them because a coup came in. Because we have a history of always supporting the most radical groups out there, and that's what a lot of those right-wing groups are, going back to what we were talking about. But what's the actual causality of the fentanyl situation and the problem in the first place? Well, we have a nation full of addicts. Well, how did they become addicts in the first place? Well, we have a big pharma industry out here that gave away opioids and benzos and Adderall like it was Pez candy. I'm not saying there's not people who need these type of things. I have a subscriber to my channel, one of my favorite ones. She uses opioids on a daily basis because she has major migraines, but she controls it and she needs it, and you can use it. But kratom, well, that's another thing we've talked about. But the
I'll
fact
always
is,
fight against opioids work, but that's I know
kratom. And I'm there with you. I'm not in that boat. I don't know. I've always been just a pothead that likes to eat too much food. So my problems are my problems. But the fact is that we have addicts in the first place, and the Sackler families had to pay a lot of money for this. Not a lot of money compared to what they made, but once again, proving the fact that we have an industry which turns our citizens into addicts. Now, you can argue that it's a greater plan that's going on there, that an addicted society is an easier society to control. But at the end of the day, we wouldn't have a need for so much fentanyl, opioids, opium, heroin, all these things, if we didn't have a society that was easily just taking a pill to make themselves feel better. That is where we have to fix the problem, right there. Just like when it comes to migration, Lowell, and I said this yesterday, you guys who want a wall, I'll give you the biggest wall, the greatest wall, whatever he said. I'll give you space lasers on it, whatever you want. Just close the 82 bases in Latin America. Let them have their national sovereignty and their resource sovereignty, and I'll give you a fucking wall. That was the compromise I would have made and stuff. So we need to talk about the causality. So fentanyl, schmetanyl, it's bad. It's awful. Let's have a society that's not being drugged out and turning into addicts in the first place.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I just want to comment on that as someone who I'm living abroad for almost 20 years, permanently expatriated, and just one thing I learned in Peace Corps Mongolia was that you never really understand your own country, like let's say U.S., until you've lived outside of it, and then you look in from without. Not just for a short time, but for a longer period of time. And then so every time I come back into the empire, I notice these things, and having lived in these different countries, you can see a big difference when you go to the U.S. and people that I know. So many people in the U.S. are either on legal, drugs, substances, or illegal. So pot, cocaine, or they're taking these legal painkillers they mix with alcohol and that gets them high. And it's like, that's a huge world of difference from other parts of the world. And so it's just to your point, Pasta, it's like, yeah, it's crazy. America is basically like the closest to Brave New World with Soma and all of that. So
I just want to know how a party of individual responsibility doesn't want to take any responsibility for its government's actions, and they want to blame other countries all the time. I'm sorry to interrupt, Ryan. I just wanted to fit that in there because it just drives me fucking crazy.
Well, they blame half of the government. Exactly. And they blame, half of the people, and they blame, 2/3 of somebody's foreign policy because they were taking the wrong money.
Yeah, but we have better management, Steve.
Here's the problem is that there's an unelected permanent state that exists behind the people who walk out on camera and pretend to be our representatives. And we do often get caught up in the surface level emotional drama of it, to where you're like, oh, this person aligns with me on this and they'll get my vote when we all call in next week. And, oh, I hope this one gets a rose. And, oh, I hope this one gets voted off the island, and, all that kind of shit. But at the end of it, they're still actors, and they're still putting on a show for everybody while there's a government that's going on behind the scenes. And yet they might be our only physically identifiable connection to that government that goes on behind the scenes. And that may lead to some of the attachment that a lot of people develop to these Congress critters, because they need to feel like they're vicariously connected to power or something like that. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. But the problems that the United States faces can't be resolved until the unelected permanent state no longer has the ability to operate with impunity in the dark. And so unwinding the rest of the web of shit, it all stems from that. And really at this point, because, to the points we've all been making about a globalist and the connectivity of it all, without waging significant counter-economic warfare and making something like a CBDC worthless, and making something like anything connected to a CBDC totally worthless, that stranglehold is going to continue, because it's not as if that's hyper localized. You can heal your community and you can safeguard it, and that's something you can do on a local level. That's something you can work towards, but without having a literal shadow government.
Yeah. Well, I think and until we can see through the two-party paradigm, we're not even going to begin to get to that level. And these are these different layers. The two-party paradigm is what keeps us pointing at that side. No, it's this side, and we all fail to see it. And you're right, Steve. And we haven't even begun to get into to the masses, to the real crux of the problem. The continuity of government and the obviously parallel structures that we barely even understand, most people anyway. But I want to go back real quickly, point out to your point that I'm glad you said that about. It's amazing. When I first traveled outside the United States, I was 18. I didn't live outside, but I traveled outside, and just that, to your point, it really kind of shatters your perspectives when you ask other people about things that you think are just world common knowledge, and they're like, you must be an American. And you're like, and you just kind of wake up to it. I didn't immediately think that they must be right and I must be wrong, but you go, oh, so there are other perspectives than what we are told everybody thinks. And it's weird how that opens your mind to, the smaller parts of it, where you get into the little things in our country, and where, even that we think we know these things, but when you really take the moment to break through them, it's a much bigger picture. And I think that's why I think a lot of our the way we're raised, like not to be taught to learn other languages, that we're incentivized to not leave, to, it's more difficult than ever today. And I think that's why. Sort of like stopping us from having dinners with our families every night. You know, they want you to stop exchanging information and learning about other people, especially foreign countries, because we see through their eyes. You know, it's important, I think. Good point.
The wall is to keep Americans in, as Ron Paul says.
Right.
And, you know, I think all this hype about freaking people out about Mexico is also to keep you not going to greener pastures. For some people, you know, you'll find greener pastures in Latin America. For others, it's better to stay in the U.S. And, you know, people ask me, well, you know, the security situation, it's not great, you know, but I'm still alive, and everyone that I know is still alive after a decade in Mexico. So how bad can that be? And I was looking at clips from my hometown, Chicago, this weekend. Like, absolutely just not. I'm actually fearing for my mother's life in Chicago now.
It's a great point. That's sad. For those who don't know, I think it was something like 3 children died, like 30 something. It was 30 something people. I forget it. The bottom line is that then no one talked about it. That's what's crazy. Silence. And except we're hyping up every other thing we can point at. You know, it just shows you that only certain kinds of shootings matter to the corporate media. It's sad.
And on the point about Steve's deep state thing, I mean, I think we have a global deep state. I mean, you've got a Mexican deep state. You've got an American deep state. I was just looking, you know, in Croatia, you got a deep state. The prime minister is a candidate for next NATO Secretary General. And it's just kind of depressing, actually. You know, sorry to blackfill, but you look at the population here in Mexico, it's like so many people still pick their parties and play these party politics. And it's just so hard to get through to them that there exists this parallel structure. So I don't know.
So, I mean, we don't need to, though. Like, I truly believe this. If you've already got it figured out, work on building your alternative to the digital prison, because there's always, we were talking about this on the Union League. One of last night, we've talked about it here quite a bit. There's always going to be that like soft void in the middle. If you normies, NPs, whatever you want to call it, about right around 2/3, maybe a little less. Let's say 40 to 60%, but enough to be a major impact. So those people have to have an alternative before they're going to do anything, because the current status quo is where their entire world resides. They're not going to leave that for nothing. They're not going to leave that for maybe if I work hard, I can make it, because that's not where, nobody has that mentality right now. Or not enough people have that mentality right now. But if you do, and if you're already in a position to where you're like, yo, dude, there's, you know, you're black-pilled enough to have the thoughts that you had, just take it another step into that little white-pilled space and be like, because I'm aware of these things, I have the opportunity before it does all come crashing down to connect with people who have understood a multitude of the things that I've understood and have different and matching skill sets to mine. And we can now take these things and present an alternative. And if enough of that happens, you don't have to all hold hands. We don't have to all, hang out at the same bar every night. Yeah. We don't have to. In fact, it would be better if there were decently networked, space in between, legitimate communities, because that gives other people the opportunity, the soft void in the middle, to go, well, I guess there is something else I could be doing that is viable.
Build it and they will come mentality.
Yeah. I would add just
go ahead.
No, just I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a really very valid point that they clear. A lot of the average people don't. The truth isn't their motivating factor, right? It's about what makes my life easier, what makes this make sense. And so if you're coming out going, everything you know is false, they're like, well, what else do I do? And you're like, I don't know. They're going to go right back to sleep. It's like that kind of makes sense. But I would argue, and I think you all agree, that it needs to be both. right? What we're doing here by showing people, giving them that direction for the moment when they do decide to go down that path, that's important too. And I think we all agree with that. But you're right, though, Steve. I think right now is the time of action. We need to see more and more people building alternative platforms, alternative, doctor's offices, alternative, all these different things to where you can go and deal with your necessities outside of the controlled CBDC digital infrastructure direction. I think but we are seeing that. It's interesting to see a lot of, for instance, Catherine Austin Fitz again is that, just talking about that from before. They're working up for Tennessee on a sovereign bank for people. It's outside the structure, and they've got a lot of backing for it. I'm going to be looking more into that. So I agree. I think that's important. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to mention, it's funny down here in Mexico. Like, I went to Derek Brose's Greater Reset in Morelia. I've got Alzheimer's. I already forget when that was, like in January or something. And there was an elderly Mexican couple whose Derek used their business for the interpretation, translation service from English to Spanish. And I met them, and they have similar Christian views to the end of the world and the apocalypse. And we just got to talking, and I met them recently in Guadalajara. And they were looking to buy land outside of the city to prepare for whatever it is that's coming. And then just recently, I met a French woman and a Chilean Croatian here in Guadalajara, and they had actually visited one of the other communities. There are different communities outside of Guadalajara. Just for example, there's this uber Catholic community that's already like a bunch of people living together, preparing for the end of the world. And it's just like, there's people doing that stuff. And, it's interesting to be able to talk to all these different people, even, as Steve was mentioning, if they don't have your same exact values, but I think we can all agree. I mean, if you're concerned about, if you've got food and water and basically a basic parallel structure, I don't really care, what else you think. So.
Well, I was just going to say before, I'm gonna have to drop off, guys, and jump on to my next thing. But it's great. It's great seeing you again, brother. And I always enjoy talking with you. And enjoy the rest of the Tuesday, guys. It's good to see you.
What all you got going on today, Ryan?
I've got a few things. Like, one is a show that I need to get to, but I feel like I've got what else was it? Oh, that's right. I've got a cool an event tonight that I think would be fun. And just kind of speaking to what we're talking about, more community-driven overlap. Like reaching out to people around you, action in the real life. This is a group called Make Americans Free Again. So it's kind of, that's the direction. It's not partisan. So I'm kind of looking forward to that, to kind of immerse myself more in this local community. I mean, just even myself, trying to branch out and try to actually get more, fingers in the ground kind of a thing. But the show and I got an article coming up from Robert today and a few other things. But
I think I've interviewed the lady from Make Americans Free Again. What's her name?
I'm not actually sure. Like, I actually just found out of the group through the Children's Health Defense Tennessee fundraiser I just went to, and a lot of them were there. And so I think Scott from Rebunked goes, and so I'm going to go for the first time tonight. So I'll say more about it. It seems like a really good, the way it's going forward. I'm glad you interviewed him, because that's the kind of stuff we need more of. These local groups fighting for nonpartisan awareness and medical freedom. It's important.
Pam Popper, that's her name. Pam Popper. Yeah,
that sounds familiar. Yeah,
I had her on TNT. Yeah.
Heck yeah. All right, brother. Well, thanks as always for pulling up on Tuesday.
Thank you, Ryan.
Always a pleasure.
And clear a Tuesday evening over the next couple of weeks, and we'll have you come through Blunt Force.
Yeah, just let me know which ones you want. I'll put it in my calendar. If it doesn't go on my calendar these days, it doesn't exist.
Tuesday till Tuesday. Remember till Tuesday. Voices carry. You're an '80s guy. You remember that? I know you do.
Oh, right. I'm talking about. Well, just Steve, just shoot me a DM and we'll pick some dates. Right. I definitely want to join. I think it'll be fun.
Okay.
Later,
all right, man.
See you later.
Take care, brother.